Hey Nintendo, Super Mario All-Stars has a problem, and it's a little bit more than just a Gamecube controller, or in my case, the 64. Let's get into it.
Off for the 64, and oh, this is pretty cool. Haven't seen this yet.
Okay, so to get started, we need to know who the target audience for this game is before we actually find out what the exact problem of the game is. Because I know a lot of you online have already said, oh, I can't play with a GameCube controller. Why can't I do that? It's because it's missing a button. And while that is in essence a bit of the problem, it's not the main focus of how that problem came. So who is this game marketed towards? Well, it's not a big secret for me and my friends that I worked at GameStop for about 8 years up until the pandemic. And where I'm actually pretty happy to leave, it gives me some pretty good insight to who do you think I should be trying to sell this to. Now, a lot of people outside is going to go, well, it's a remaster of 3 classic games from my childhood. So it should be for me. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you gotta be, this is for the next generation of gamers. This is for my daughter, my son, my nieces, nephews, who haven't got a chance to play these classics and they still hold up. And, they should be able to play it. So, who's it for? It's not for your kids. As much as I really want it to be for your kids, I would never attempt to try to sell this to a mom trying to get it for their kids. I did that once as a huge mistake for Sonic Mania, and you wouldn't believe how often that got returned saying, oh, the game's broken, it's all blurry, why isn't it smooth? It's called 16-bit, 32-bit, they didn't get bits. So looking at Mario 64, a lot of kids would look at that and go, I don't want to play it, it doesn't look good. And if they were trying to aim for those kids, they would have cleaned it up a bit instead of having it an exact port. Another evidence that shows that it's not for those kids, there's a limited time quantity, even digital. I mean, how hard is it to just keep the digital one on the eShop forever? God knows they do the same thing with Legend of Zelda, Pokemon, and Mario Odyssey. So why can't they do it for this? It's not like they don't own the rights. It's Mario. It's Nintendo. That's because they want you to rush to get it. They want anyone who's holding out on buying a Switch to buy one now to get this. They want someone who looks at this and go, man, I need that. And it's not going to be a kid. It's going to be someone who's almost hitting their 30s or past that because we grew up with this. My first Mario game was Mario 64. And I didn't know he had a side-scrolling counterpart until past GameCube. So, yeah, it's not for them, it's for us. Another evidence of that is if you're going to rush during a pandemic to buy something, you kind of need money. Kids don't have money, and even if kids did have a part-time job cutting grass or whatever, they didn't do it during the pandemic, so it's not for them, it's for us. So that is where the problem stands. I don't think Nintendo really illustrated that it is for us. And I'll show you why. Who is this game marketed towards? Well, it's not a big secret for me and my friends that I worked at GameStop for about 8 years up until the pandemic. And where I'm actually pretty happy to leave, it gives me some pretty good insight to who do you think I should be trying to sell this to. Now, a lot of people outside is going to go, well, it's a remaster of 3 classic games from my childhood. So it should be for me. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you gotta be, this is for the next generation of gamers. This is for my daughter, my son, my nieces, nephews, who haven't got a chance to play these classics and they still hold up. And, they should be able to play it. So, who's it for? It's not for your kids. As much as I really want it to be for your kids, I would never attempt to try to sell this to a mom trying to get it for their kids. I did that once as a huge mistake for Sonic Mania, and you wouldn't believe how often that got returned saying, oh, the game's broken, it's all blurry, why isn't it smooth? It's called 16-bit, 32-bit. They didn't get bits. So looking at Mario 64, a lot of kids would look at that and go, I don't want to play it. It doesn't look good. And if they were trying to aim for those kids, they would have cleaned it up a bit instead of having it an exact port. Another evidence that shows that it's not for those kids, there's a limited time quantity, even digital. I mean, how hard is it to just keep the digital one on the eShop forever? God knows they do the same thing with Legend of Zelda, Pokemon, and Mario Odyssey. So why can't they do it for this? It's not like they don't own the rights. It's Mario. It's Nintendo. That's because they want you to rush to get it. They want anyone who's holding out on buying a Switch to buy one now to get this. They want someone who looks at this and go, man, I need that. And it's not going to be a kid. It's going to be someone who's almost hitting their 30s or past that, because we grew up with this. My first Mario game was Mario 64. And I didn't know he had a side-scrolling counterpart until, past Gamecube? So we know who the game is for. But now we need to talk about the real problem. If the game is for us older generation, the people going out in a pandemic to buy this for nostalgia, we want to play it in the nostalgic way. Enters the controller. Note that this isn't the exact problem, but it's a small portion of it. The game works perfectly with your standardized Joy-Con controller, even down to the motion controls and the Wii version, Mario Galaxy. Now, you also get motion controls and all that fun stuff if you're using this guy, the official Pro Controller. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's for Switch. Of course that's going to work. But we're not here to play a Switch game. We want N64, we want GameCube, we want Wii. We want all of that on our system, not just to go, but when you're at home playing, it's going to make you feel of a better time. And we kind of have the ability to do that. Power A made the wireless GameCube controller with the extra buttons, and that allows it to work with a slew of other games. That includes, of course, Smash Bros., Mario Kart, Legend of Zelda, and anything else you can think of that works with a Pro Controller. And yes, this thing has motion controls. And that is crazy for me. It's no secret that I used to work at GameStop up until the pandemic. But this is one of the most sought-after controllers that they're still making. It's lightweight, it feels like a GameCube controller, and it does everything a GameCube controller should, but wireless. No more looking for an adapter, no more trying to find that perfect controller. This does everything with the exception of the pressurized triggers. It's all or nothing. But hey, that's a compromise I'm willing to do if I can play other games with it. So, what is the problem? Because this does work for Sunshine. The problem is, we need to find out what makes this controller so iconic that Nintendo feels the need to reprint it, to make adapters for it, that other companies feel the need to keep bringing it out. And strangely enough, this reason is why it doesn't work on a GameCube game on Switch. So the GameCube controller. It's one of the most comfortable, easy to play, and honestly, most innovative controller Nintendo has ever put out. And I know, innovated, really? You don't have motion controls, you barely have vibration, and you're saying this is more innovative than a Joy-Con? Yes. Yes, it is. So, I want you to take a good, hard look at this controller here. What stands out to you? That's right, the giant green, red, and yellow on the right-hand side of this controller. Now, why would they make 2 buttons and a stick so eye-catching that you already know where they're at before looking down? Why would they give the A button so much real estate in the middle and kind of push everything else to the side? Well, fun fact, when GameCube was in the developmental stage, they didn't really have a dev kit. Instead, they used a PS1 and made games for that to test it out. So, why would they do that instead of having an official dev kit? It's because they wanted the guys making the games, the people making Mario Sunshine, Luigi's Mansion, Kirby Air Ride, all of those games are in development. They want them to design a controller collectively that works to play every game on it. They want it to be the most easy experience for any gamer coming up, for any parents that had to help those gamers, and honestly, the parents themselves who want to game. So, they designed this controller. Now, I want you to think back, and for those of you who still have a GameCube controller, definitely try this out. Look through your manuals. Yeah, that's right, manuals, things that don't really exist anymore. What is the most primary button to attack, to jump, or whatever your game is? If it's a platformer, what's the jump button? If it's a beat 'em up, what's the attack button? The answer is going to be that A button. Whatever button you're using the most in that game is going to be mapped to A. And I know what you're thinking. That can't be true. And then you start to think, air ride. Oh, that was A, to drive. Okay. Let's do Star Fox. Well, that was A to jump and B to shoot your blaster. Okay. So let's do anything else, and it's A. A is your primary button. The second primary button is going to be that red button right here. And everything else is kind of mapped off to the side because it's important, just not as important. So they want it to be eye-catching. That's why this was a different color than the 2 triggers that you normally get. That's why this, being their new kind of stick, because again, before, you had this guy. This was important. They wanted to make sure you knew that the C stick was the C buttons from before. And they wanted to make sure that everything was as fluid as possible for each and every game you were playing. They wanted to make it so intuitive that you didn't need to look at the manual. You can just do it by feel and go, okay, if A is to attack, B must be able to take out my bow, right? And you're right. So, why doesn't that translate to Mario Sunshine that almost pioneered this controller with the GameCube? Well, that's because all the buttons are mapped to the actual letter and not the position on the controller. What I mean by that is, if you look at a genuine Joy-Con, you're going to see that the B button's at the bottom, the A button is at the top right, or side right, the Y button is on the left, and the X is on top. Now, does that really matter? Yeah, a whole lot actually. Because if you look at the GameCube controller, it's actually the exact opposite. The A button is dead center in the middle. The B button, which is supposed to be on the direct bottom, is off to the left. The top is Y, and the right is X. Now, I get that with new controllers, they wanted to model it off of what people know now, which is Xbox and PlayStation. But in doing this one act, for this one specific game, it put everything out of proportion. Suddenly, A and B, which should be jump and kick in Mario 64, is now jump and jump. And the attack buttons, or the secondary, or in this case, third offshoot buttons, that we didn't really use. So now it starts to feel like it's against our muscle memory, because it is. Every aspect of that one thing has changed. You had a perfect layout, but because it's mapped to this, it's no longer perfect, and thus it's flawed. But is that really the problem? It's a huge part of it, but no. The problem is even easier and lazier than that. And Nintendo, I'm a little disappointed.
Oh, dude, this... Alright, what if I... Ah!
So the problem is that the buttons don't match the original controllers. And I get, for the Nintendo Switch, that would be a problem. For example, I tried playing on livestream, definitely go check out my channel, that N64 controller on Switch. Yeah, Nintendo isn't meant to actually figure that one out, because I bought a third-party adapter to turn the 64 controller's port to a GameCube port, and then use the GameCube adapter, and yeah, that works, but that's not Nintendo's problem. They didn't think about anyone using a 64 controller yet. But in this case, I don't have X or Y. So what happens with me when I'm playing 64 with this is that I can't attack. That means I can't do the kick, I can't do the wall jump, and the only thing I really get is a ground pound, which, unfortunately, is not the Z button. The ground pound is this guy here. So when I'm playing, I am moving with this, and then once I want to get into battle mode, I have to move my hand from here to here. And I can only ground pound, which means that fight with Bowser, it's not happening anytime soon. The run is dead. But we'll get to that later. The issue with that is, this is the way I wanted to play. My entire reason for spending that $60 was so that I can play classic. I can play the way I grew up, and even though my friends didn't really see that, when I mentioned that this was a possibility, they all wanted to know where I got my adapter from, because they wanted to try it. And then I had to give them the bad news that it doesn't work yet, because they can fix all of this. They can fix why it feels clunky in Sunshine. They can fix why I can't attack Bowser in 64. And it's something that has been done for years. And that's a control layout. Being able to just change simple things from what I want A to do, what I want B to do. And I get that Nintendo doesn't like giving up that kind of control, because it's one of their games. But the issue nowadays is that that's a fair argument if you're playing with other people. But you're not. It's a single-player experience 99% of the time when you're playing these three games. And I know what a lot of people are thinking, and it's what I'm thinking. Well, I could change my controls in Smash Brothers to literally anything I want. And you're right. I don't understand why Nintendo wouldn't put that same menu, that same kind of idea, inside of these three classic games. And it's not like they didn't know that this was a possibility. Months before the game came out, they've already said, hey, you won't be able to use GameCube controllers. There's no GameCube support. And they knew it's because one button is missing and you wouldn't be able to do ground pound. Now, would that be enough for them to say, well, we can't do it? No, I'm pretty sure they realized that the layout of the GameCube controller just didn't feel right anymore once they changed the buttons. So, my question is, why can't I just hit a switch and it turns it back to the layout of the classics? You know? That way, I, as the consumer, know that I'm pressing pause, I'm swapping to the preset of yesteryear, and hey, it's on me. I'm willing to say that you can go the lazy route and not even change any of the signs that say what button to hit. Because if I'm changing the controls, I'm doing it to myself and I can figure it out. But that's not the only part of this that just felt lazy or wrong. Again, I used to work at a store, GameStop, that I actually loved working at, but I'm happy to leave. I've heard from my old colleagues that people were ranting and they're upset and they want refunds, and good luck going to any normal GameStop and getting a full refund on a new Nintendo game that's been opened. But especially for this reason, you can't change the direction of the camera. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, you can move the camera with the thumbstick. That's not what I'm saying. Is that all of the camera's motions are inverted. Right is left, left is right. You know, think of any piloting game. If you're flying a plane, that's kind of controls for the camera. And that was standard back then. But it's not now. And the part that kind of gets me confused is, sure, you didn't let me change the buttons for all of that. But Nintendo has been making games for years. They've made Star Fox, they made Splatoon. They know that people want to be able to change what axis their camera's using. And yet in this one, they just completely threw it out the window. It's almost like they forgot. Now, all of this, every single problem I've talked to you about, could be changed with a simple update. I'm hoping that that update happens. But with all of these bad things, there is a little gem of good. And I want to leave you off with that little bit of a gem. So, what is this gem of goodness, I guess, that Nintendo accidentally left in the game? Because it's definitely an accident. There's no secret here, I like using odd controllers, and I like playing games in a way that Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox, and even some PC developers, did not really intend for me to do. Enter the Gamecube Controller. Yes, I know, we just talked about how it just doesn't work, but here enter any second controller. You see, they are so sure that you know that this game is single player, because again, they're focusing on your nostalgia, that they didn't take out a small hiccup that most people probably won't ever notice. And that is, if you have two controllers plugged in, they all control Mario. In fact, while I haven't tried it, there's nothing to tell me that if I don't plug in 3 or 4 controllers, that they're not all going to control Mario. When I was trying to figure out a way to kick using the N64 controller, I plugged in the GameCube controller just to make sure, am I going crazy? Is this a button I'm just missing? And without unplugging the other controller, it kicked. I freaked out. I'm like, what did I do? And it's just because I pressed the button. And then I moved the joystick with the other controller, and I'm like, I can do some real fun things with this. If you ever have a niece, a nephew that did want to play this, now it's for that other player. If you want someone that you want to take along with the experience, you don't have to pretend like their controller's plugged in anymore. Now it is. And it can be a more fun experience of a tug-of-war of who's playing Mario now, who's attacking now, or in some aspects, who's doing both at the same time. This is not my own brainchild idea. This has been going on as long as gaming had 2 controllers. But if you're controlling the same character, I want to encourage you. Play with your siblings. Play with your parents. Play with your best friend. I want to see Game Grumps do this, where they don't talk to each other at all. No communication. but they're sitting next to each other trying to beat Bowser and see if they have the same mindset. Who goes left? Who goes right? Who ends up running directly into Bowser and losing the entire fight? And that alone changes the whole dynamic of this game. And I know if Nintendo does listen to me and does find this video, unfortunately, if they're going to fix everything else, they're probably going to fix this too. So, get it while the getting's good. Enjoy the game that you have, and, like always, moms are people too. Keep it easy, players.
Booyah! That's what we're talking about.